Interim.
Do you want me to say interim?
Like there's any chance will not be official, but just
It just sounds, yeah.
Okay, and you are live.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the Nantucket Small Business Update. We have Kristie Ferrantella, president of the Nantucket Chamber of Commerce, and very happy to see Margaretta Andrews from the Community Foundation Nantucket. We're here to talk about anything small business updates and also about nonprofits and all the work that Margaretta and the Community Foundation is doing. So I want to start to say hello. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Kristie, what can you tell us? What's happened the last 2 or 3, 4 days that small businesses need to know about?
Yeah, so one of the most important things is the expansion of unemployment. We found out a couple weeks ago that this was expanding to people who typically don't qualify. So self-employed, 1099 contractors, people who work part-time, people who work for churches. So they just finally released that. They had said April 30th and they got it done 10 days early. So people can go on to the Mass DUA website and start their application to start collecting, and it will be retroactive for when COVID started to affect your business. Another business update is the PPP funds and the EIDL EIDL loan are temporarily on pause because of funding, but we're encouraging all businesses to continue to keep gathering their information, be ready to submit if you haven't already applied as soon as the funding goes through, which we're hopeful Congress will pass through this week. We want businesses to be first in line, especially Nantucket businesses, to get access to those loans. And the other update, the Board of Health did approve the slow phased reentry for landscaping and construction. So you can go to the town website if you have any questions about getting your business open. It's very limited, 1 to 2 people. All the information is on the town website.
Kristie, on the PPP loans, and if you haven't already applied, should you wait until it reopens, or can you apply with your bank through the SBA, or are you just getting things ready and organized?
Right now, just getting things ready. No banks are accepting the applications, but definitely be in touch with your banker so that you can be notified as soon as possible.
And are people seeing the PP loans come in? Are people seeing the EIDL grants loans coming in? What have you heard on Nantucket?
Yes, so a lot of the PPP loans that went through that first round, the April 2nd or April 3rd, those are definitely starting to see the funding because you get the cash 10 days after you close. And so those businesses that acted very quickly are seeing the results of that. Unfortunately, the contractors weren't allowed to apply until the 10th, and so those are slower to see those funds. But many banks have entered the information, and if you applied before they closed the application, you're still in line, and hopefully as soon as there's funding, you would kind of be first in line to get those. And then obviously when there's more funding, they'll hopefully open up the applications for anybody who missed that first round.
And EIDL, has anybody seen that on the island? And that's also stopped? Because I applied for that myself for my 2 small businesses, and that was really easy when they came out with the new website.
Yeah, even the chamber applied for that, and we have not heard back yet. I have heard of a couple small businesses who applied very early, kind of like March 30th, March 31st, started to see the advancements come through. It's $1,000 per employee. So people are seeing like $3,000 or $4,000 coming through. And then some have started to also receive the grant information, the loan information. So closing on that. I haven't heard of anybody closing on their loan and actually getting the funds, but it is moving slowly. And I'm hopeful that Congress will, I'm overly optimistic that Congress will pass through some more funding.
Thank you, Kristie. We don't have any comments yet over on YouTube, but Margaretta, what you've been doing a lot, you and your staff at the Community Foundation. Give us an update of what have you been doing the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks?
I'm muted by the host, so you have muted me.
There we go.
Now you can hear me? Sorry.
Yeah.
I want to thank Kristie and the Chamber of Commerce for providing a lot of information to me specifically that I can pass along to the nonprofits, because at the end of the day, our nonprofits are small businesses and some of them large businesses. Not all of the information that is passed along is for the nonprofit sector, but a lot of it does apply. So we've got some great feedback. So I appreciate the sharing of information. So yeah, we've been busy raising money and sending money out the door. That's pretty much what we do as a community foundation. We started the Emergency Relief Fund about 3 weeks ago now, and are on track to raise a little more than $1 million, which is incredible in a short period of time. We have sent out grants to our nonprofits, about $275,000 so far. And as I've explained to other groups, we've had kind of a tiered approach to the applications and the grant making that we've done so far. The first wave of grants are going to be directed, have been and continue to be directed at the nonprofits who are currently up and running and providing critical services to the community and need support to do that. The next wave is going to be for those organizations that are vital to the community but are mandated to be closed based on the governor's orders, the state's orders, the town's orders. So we need them to be prepared and ready once those bans are lifted to be up and running and go to provide the services that are so necessary. And then the third phase would be to the rest of our nonprofit sector, which we know is going to be hugely impacted by the loss of revenue for the summer from events that are probably not going to happen. We've seen events up through pretty much all of July be canceled or indefinitely postponed. And I would imagine August might look the same. We don't know that for sure, but I think that the word on the street is that it's likely that it will look that way. So, and also programming. We've had our nonprofits reach out and say that they're unable to do the programming that they typically do, whether it's the staff that they would need, interns they would need. They're not sure people will be here to take advantage of the programs. So all of that revenue that they depend on for their operations is going to be impacted. So our hope is that there's enough money in the fund when phases 1 and 2 kind of get settled in a bit, that there'll be enough to really try and make our sector as whole as possible.
Well, it sounds like you're getting a lot of emails. There's a lot of stuff going on there.
I just said before, I don't know how to turn that off.
This is the world we're living in, right? Noises and
it's pretty constant. It is.
Kristie, I saw your dog run behind you. I mean, like, this is how it is. Could you give, so in the emergency fund, that $1 million, has been donated or will be donated. You've given out 275, and then first phase is, what are some examples of critical services?
So far, I don't have the list in front of me. We had a press release last week. I should have had that with me. I apologize. I know that we had, Fairwinds. We had Health Imperatives. Those are up, running, providing services, even their virtual services. Some small grants like the Boys and Girls Club that are doing remote learning right now. They needed a laptop for one of their director of operations to be able to work remotely. That was kind of an easy, quick, get that done. So it's not all necessarily feeding the hungry and the poor, although that's exactly what we did. We had a large grant that went out to Nantucket Food, Fuel, and Rental Assistance. That was probably one of the biggest ones that we sent out. Phase 2, we had Small Friends and Rising Tide, who are daycare preschools that are going to be open at some point, although now I'm hearing that that's even going to be further delayed. But when our workers start to go back to work, they need somewhere for their children to be. We just got notification. I think everybody's probably aware by now. The governor has mandated that the schools be closed through the end of the school year, and the EEC providers be closed at least through June. So that I know is Rising Tide. I'm not sure about Small Friends. So there's going to be a huge need for adequate, competent, licensed daycare on this community that will not be met, and at least the way we're used to having it be met. So that's probably the number one thing on our radar right now. And that's literally as of today. And that's probably most of the emails that you're hearing about right now.
Thank you. I have one question. Will businesses that have already submitted applications but not been funded yet be ahead of new applications when the loans open up again? Do you expect any new applications to get funds? I guess that's more about your system of how you organize all your applications.
I don't know if that's for us or if that's for the loan process, I would think, because we're not loans, we're grants.
Yeah, so I think that was in reference to the PPP.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yep.
I haven't heard what the process will be, but I would assume that people who are already in the system would get the funds first. But I know that they've been working on a package that would cover the need of people who haven't applied and people who have applied.
Thank you. So we have the emergency fund, right? And that's been very successful. You've given out $250,000. That's huge. That's going to continue to happen. What other funds have been established in the last week? I know there was a big one that just came online recently.
And they are popping. So it's Act Saves, which is a community initiative. Locals for locals is kind of the way that they're phrasing it. These are concerned Nantucket residents, both year-round and seasonal, who really wanted to direct as much support as possible to the individual islander and their families, which is a challenge for a community foundation. We're not able to provide direct relief to any individuals. So they created a fund with us that was going to specifically support Nantucket food, fuel, and rental assistance only, because that was the way that they really felt they could provide that direct support to the islanders. There are going to be gift cards for the Stop and Shop. They can have their rent and mortgage paid directly, utilities paid directly. So it's not cash to the individual, it's paying their expenses on their behalf. So that has been a very busy fund. It's just about a week now that they kind of started their fundraising effort, and they have been wildly successful. I'm not going to give you any figures because that's for them to share, but there's been a lot of activity on the fund.
Sorry, I'm trying to unmute here. There we go. So what is the difference of the Act Saves Fund versus the emergency fund? And I always ask you this whenever we talk and interview, so people understand where do they want to give and where do they want to put their money. Right. Why do this versus sending it right to the food pantry or somewhere else? And
thank you, because we get a lot of questions about the only reason why these dollars are not going directly to Nantucket Food, Fuel, and Rental is because their staff is small and they're really not equipped to handle the number of donations that are coming in right now. We're staffed up for it. So this is what we do. So it's really an administrative service that we're providing to them. So all the gifts come to the Community Foundation for Nantucket specifically for Act Saves. We acknowledge those gifts as charitable, and we turn around and send all those dollars directly to Nantucket Food, Fuel, and Rental Assistance. So that's the only reason. The Emergency Relief Fund, we also are supporting Nantucket Food, Fuel, and Rental Assistance along with all the other providers of service in the community. So it's a broader brush, a wider reach, and we will eventually, we hope, with enough funding, move out of the specifically only human service area into some of our cultural organizations and conservation organizations and education, because that's our role as a community foundation, is to support them all. And our donors, we say we support them all. It's our donors that support them all. Our donors are the ones that create these funds so that we can support this community. So they're the ones that deserve the thanks.
And how do you know when it's okay to move into more phase 2 and maybe phase 3, or to spread it around? Like that's got to be difficult.
We're in uncharted territory, just like everybody else. We've never done this before. I have an amazing executive committee. We meet 2 or 3 times a week to discuss these grant applications. We met this morning, and that was the topic of conversation: is when do we know the emergency part is done and we're ready for phase 2? Phase 2 is actually kind of easier to quantify because that's when the town literally opens up, right? And these providers are allowed to open up unless there's a special provision for them. But my guess is, especially for childcare, if the schools are going to be closed, the big childcare centers, I can't imagine, would be open, because the idea is not to have everybody all together in one space. So how do we safely and adequately provide childcare to our young people when their parents go back to work under these circumstances? I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I think this community is always creative and always comes through in some wonderful way. So my guess is that there will be a solution. It may not be perfect, but there will be some solutions that are coming forward as we move forward.
Yeah, my 2-year-old's really curious when she gets to go back to small friends. She doesn't use those words, but she's asking about her friends.
They are. And how are you going to tell her, no, sorry, 6 feet apart? Sir, you can't hug your best friend. There's no concept of that with our youngest group. So I don't know what this is going to look like. I don't, but we're here. Our message to everybody out in the community is, if you have a creative idea, let us know, because we're not here to think of the creative ideas. We're here to hear them, vet them, and fund them. Mm-hmm. So if there's something out there that we can help with, this is where we can go to an individual donor or a group of donors and say, wow, there's an amazing initiative out there. What do you think? And people respond to that. The donors have been incredible. They really have.
That's good to hear that with ideas come in, you can be adaptable and creative within these funds that are already established.
Absolutely. Or create a new one. There was one small fund that I didn't mention because it is very focused. And that was when Patrick Ridge stepped up and right at the very beginning when the school closed and helped the school provide meals to their children, and did that for free for quite some time. And then there was an individual that wanted to support him and had a family foundation. So the family foundation cannot direct dollars to an enterprise. They didn't really want to go through the school. So we created a separate fund specifically to support Island Kitchens initiative to help and support the food service program at the school. So that was a very individual. I don't believe that there's going to need to be more funding in that. Right now, it's not really open for other donations. But now that is extended through June, I don't know. There's a possibility we would open that to other donors. I just don't know what that's going to look like financially.
And Margaretta, do you have any other initiatives going on? Is there something with food and nonprofits?
There is. That was the last one. So within the Nantucket Fund for Emergency Relief, we have what we call our Emergency Food Initiative. And this is really fun. It's something that Jean Miller and Carlisle Jensen in my office have really been spearheading. It started with the Saltmarsh Center, who wanted to provide some food and meals to the seniors in our community that didn't necessarily qualify for Meals on Wheels, but they wanted to protect the seniors from going into the grocery store as often as they could. So they partnered with Or the Whale and the Sandbar. And for over 2 weeks, maybe even into the third week, those restaurants provided meals for our seniors for free. They never asked anyone for money. They just did it out of the goodness of their heart. It was incredible. And we heard about it, and we had a donor who heard about it, and he decided that he wanted to fund this initiative. So he committed $100,000 in this fund directly for the food initiative. So now Jean and Carlisle have managed to partner 7 nonprofits with local restaurants that are providing meals for their constituents. It's not need-based. This is just once a week, sometimes twice. The nonprofit decides that they will reach out to their constituents who would like a meal. They sign up. They partner with the restaurant. They pay the restaurant for those meals, which is capped at a certain level. And then we, the Community Foundation, through this $100,000 grant, reimburse them for the dollars that they've spent for the meals. So last week, which was the first full week that we did this, there was over 500 meals provided to our community.
That's amazing.
It was amazing. It really was. It was very cool.
I know that the Bee is partnering up with a Safe Place, I think.
A Safe Place.
Yep. And I heard the Boys and Girls Club. I saw some pictures online this week of them delivering meals.
The Breeze did over 100 meals for the Boys and Girls Club.
Wow.
Because they had a communal meal and all their families would come and kind of have the same thing. They'd have a potluck dinner. They can't do that anymore. But at least now they can feel like they're having the same meal and they have that sense of community. So it really, food is love. Food makes us feel good when things are not great and scary. So anything we can do around this, again, my guess is this has been so wildly successful that we may need more funding around this as well. Because I think $100,000 sounds like a lot of money, but at 500 meals a week, we could go through that pretty quickly.
So if anybody's interested in contributing, where would they go?
They would go to the Nantucket Fund for Emergency Relief. And then those dollars, if they wanted to designate it for food, we can do that. Right now, our plan is if we finish the $100,000 that was indicated there, and we have no large donor that specifically wanted to help sustain that program, that we would just start moving some dollars over. It's really going to be hard to keep track of individual donations that would be for food. But if you feel compelled, you can certainly put Food Initiative on the check or in your credit card donation.
Perfect.
And Margaret, you said that was through the emergency fund, which is right there in the middle of your website. So if you Google
whole page, our homepage is dedicated. All you have to do is just click on the homepage. So, and if not, you can just Google it. You can get into our website and put food Nantucket Fund for Emergency Relief, and it'll pop up. But the whole homepage now, if you just hover over it, it is live right to the donation page.
Okay. So you don't necessarily have to restrict it for this food program because you think there's going to be enough money to go. But if there's a bigger donation.
Exactly. So for a large donation, we would, like this one. If there's another, 50,000 or 100,000, we absolutely would, because we will continue this until, well, I'm sure there's not going to be a need for it, because I think it's kind of awesome. But I think once the restaurants are up and hopefully open, more open than they are now, it might be a burden on them to continue this program. So we would look to them to say, when are you ready to give it a day?
Okay, and just to kind of go over it again, and then ACT Saves, you can just Google ACT Saves, it'll pop up, or actsaves.org,
Yep.
and then that goes right to the food, fuel, rental assistance, which is a way to go directly to help individuals
Exactly.
in our island,
Yep.
on our island.
So the donate button on their website comes right to their fund with us.
Right.
And there also is a direct link to Nantucket food and rental assistance, so you can see how you can apply for help.
Okay.
So it's both for the donor and for the recipient.
Okay.
And they're doing the outreach in the community is amazing. So they've got an advisory group that is widespread, and they have a great donor base, and they're reaching out to all the different sectors in the community, making sure that everybody is aware that anybody who is out of work, this is not a handout. This is absolute emergency relief that every Nantucket resident is entitled to. There is no shame in asking for help right now. We were able to actually, Housing Nantucket was another one of the grants that we provided on an emergency basis, and that was forgiven the entire month of April for their clients. So all of those rents were forgiven. So that means a lot to individuals. It's incredible. That's exactly what will happen through Nantucket Food and Fuel. It might not be the entire rent or the entire mortgage, but utility bills, rent, gift cards for food, all those things, the help is there. They are there to help, and we're here to help them help. So please don't be shy in asking. There is no shame in asking. This is an emergency. This is a crisis, and our community is hurting.
It's so important, Margaretta, because if people can have their rent paid, and they can have utilities, and they have some, access to food and some, and medical care, those things, then they're more liable to stay at home.
Exactly.
During this order, and not feeling that desperation of not having money coming in and a paycheck and how to pay your rent. And so you make decisions to provide for your family. And so if we can help these families and individuals,
right,
then it's going to help us make the best decisions.
I totally agree.
Kristie, do you want to add on anything? Anything we miss on unemployment or any other thing that's happening with human services with the town?
I was just thinking that the Chamber did launch our Keep the Rock Solid campaign. So it's keeptherocksolid.com, and it has a lot of the same links. It's basically a website of how you can get help or give help, and that's for small businesses and individuals. So there's links to ACT Saves and the Community Foundation, but also ways that you can support donating to those, and then how you request help. There's a lot of different industries out there that are helping the restaurant industry. There's some campaigns in Boston and across Massachusetts. So all those links are there on the website, and it's kind of a one-stop shop to see where you can give or get help. And then we're continuing to work on trying to find a way to provide small business relief. I know that the select board is looking at economic task force. Janet Schulte and I have been looking at different things across the state. So we're still investigating and still trying to get that up and going.
And the network of volunteers is enormous on the island.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, Nantucket Neighbors, the group that's making all the masks and coordinating fabric and who's cutting the fabric. Like, people are organizing fast. A question for both of you. What areas or pockets, it could be an industry or a demographic that's being kind of missed in all of this, that's hard to get to? Is there a certain type of business, or is there a certain, is it the 1099 workers, or who are you hearing and seeing, getting funding is not missing, but it's hard to get to them? Is there anything that you've heard?
Yeah, I mean, for businesses, definitely seasonal businesses the federal stimulus package was geared towards year-round businesses. So your relief, it's more difficult to apply for the PPP and to use those funds immediately, especially seasonal restaurants who aren't open, or retail shops who can't have more people doing merchandise or anything inside their store. They basically are just paying their employees to stay home. And these programs are meant to help payroll when a significant cost for island businesses is rent and mortgage. Right. So that's definitely been something that we've seen at the Chamber, is that it's just not an adequate level of support. In terms of the individuals, and as I just said at the beginning, the unemployment got expanded, and up until yesterday, that was a really difficult time for many because they were waiting until April 30th. Now that that's opened up, I'm hopeful that they'll get funds and some relief, but many were really stuck in a place where they didn't have access to unemployment or access to the loans, and they were wondering how they were going to feed their family.
Right. And from my perspective, the homeless is just a unique little carve out in our community, and it is very real. Unfortunately, quite robust at this point, and there really are not services that are geared towards them that we can support as a community foundation. The faith-based community, I think, is aware and trying to do their best, but a lot of the programs that are in place just don't seem to quite translate to what is needed. So that would be my answer to that. Is I feel that they are definitely falling through the cracks, and not just here, that's everywhere.
We have two, one comment question. Is it possible to create gift cards for produce available from sustainable Nantucket farmers? Any programs dealing with that?
So so the individuals would get gift cards to give to farmers to purchase their produce? Is that how it would work?
Yeah, like many of the farms here, are there any gift cards? I guess you could go right to that entity, but is there any programs thinking about how to help the local farmers or get that food to people?
Yeah, no, not that I'm aware of.
Okay. It's good. Yeah. Kristie, anything there?
Yeah, I was just thinking that's a really good idea of maybe a way to expand the food relief, working with Sustainable Nantucket. That's why I like the live Q&A.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. New ideas. What did I say? New ideas.
Yeah. So for Mary, I just looked at the Stop and Shop website, and nonprofits can buy gift cards at 5% discounts. Is anybody doing that?
Food, fuel, and rental assistances, for sure. And they actually, I think they've negotiated a discount that's a little bit larger than that because they're going to be buying in bulk.
Right. That's great to hear.
Yep.
All right. More questions, community. This is good stuff. Give us your ideas. That doesn't be a question. It could be a comment too.
Make sure to refresh your screen if you don't see the comment box. So Margaretta, you had mentioned a lot of arts and cultural organizations kind of having to adapt. Do you know of any examples of how they're adapting to this new world and maybe what the summer will look like for them?
Hopefully you're all aware the Artists Association had a very successful spring sweep last weekend. I think they are quite uniquely positioned to do a virtual auction with art that may not translate to everybody else, but they were able to be wildly successful, much more than they had anticipated. And so great kudos to them for pulling it off in a very short period of time. They scrambled like crazy. And I think the donors were very receptive. And I think the artists particularly that received the proceeds from those sales were very happy because a lot of them look for that as they're kind of launching into the season. It's been a long winter, especially our year-round artists. So I think that was great. I believe that especially in the cultural groups, there will be very creative ways to do virtual entertainment and culture and art and music. My concern is that the audience may get a little tired of the virtual part after a while and start to lessen the participation. That's kind of my gut feeling and speaking to other people about it. Like if you're in August, will there be any room for another virtual event in August? That might have kind of, been the last one that they want to do. I don't know. I do know the groups that are thinking about postponing their events originally were looking at the fall, and now that the conversation about will there be a resurgence of some sort are thinking that it probably is a 2021 initiative. So the goal for everybody is to get through this year and March 4th. I think Mariah Mitchell just announced that they are not going to be able to bring their interns this summer, and most of their programming relies on the interns. So they're going to need a lot of support, extra support that they weren't anticipating because that really impacts their programming. They have some volunteers on Nantucket, but nowhere near the numbers that they need to run their programs. So that I'm aware of. I don't know. The Music Center is doing wonderful things with virtual lessons. So I think anybody who has a child at home is probably, I would be, when's the next lesson? Something different than sitting and looking at mom in the kitchen, right? So I think they're doing that, but that's not the same. They can't always do that. The instruction is a little bit different.
Yeah, it's definitely a time to look to adapt. I know with Daffodil Weekend coming up this weekend, the chamber is doing some things virtually, but we're seeing the NHA doing a live Instagram flower power party, and Nisha is going to do a live dog parade. So we're being creative, but it's tough. It's nice to share these experiences and think of our nonprofits and hopefully get people to donate to them and support them during this time.
Yeah, it's important. I think, what this happening, especially when the world kind of fell apart economically, there was real fear in the nonprofit community that donations would dry up and that people would be afraid. I say to our donors, now is the time that we need you more than ever. If you have the capacity, now is the time to give to what you care about and what means something to you, because they may not be there tomorrow, quite literally. I think we're gonna see some changes in the business world, in the nonprofit world, not just here. I think there are opportunities for working more closely together, both in the business world and the nonprofit world. I would hope that our local nonprofits would look at each other and think, are there ways that we could affect some economies of scale by working together, combining, merging, collaborating? I don't know what the word is, but I think that there are some real opportunities here that hopefully these organizations and their boards are looking pretty closely at.
Yeah, I think this has definitely been a time where we see so much more collaboration over competition, and we're all in this together. And it's been something that we're seeing across the state and locally. And I think it's a wonderful thing that we're getting to experience in the positive in all of this negative.
There is a lot of positive. We're going to come out the other side, especially here. This community is incredible. So we're going to come out the other side. We may look a little different. We may be a little worse for the wear, but we're going to come out the other side probably stronger, certainly more aware of what's important to all of us, both personally and professionally. I think there's, it's going to be an interesting 12 months.
Definitely.
I agree with you, Margaretta. This is Nantucketers, whether you've been here for 2 years or 20 years or 2 generations, like we're salty, and we're if you like living here, then you're pretty good at adapting and being innovative and collaborating. And so I'm seeing it more and more, and I want to just continue to encourage people to get on Zoom calls, and anybody in your industry, whether it's a nonprofit or all the coffee shops, should get together and talk and how to be creative and get through this and come out with different ideas to be stronger. So I agree with everything you're saying. One last question here, and then we'll wrap up. What efforts are being made to reach out to the diverse community, the Spanish, Bulgarian, Portuguese speaking community? Any thoughts there? Kristie, I know you're involved with a little bit of that.
Yeah, I was going to say for town efforts, I know that we've been trying to translate everything, especially all the orders that are emergency orders that are going through. The hospital has been translating everything. Just yesterday, the day before, the Massachusetts Department of Unemployment started a Spanish application. So they do have things in other languages as well. So they're trying to host more town halls in different languages and get all the resources out and everything translated.
Awesome. Yeah, from our perspective, in the middle of all this, as I'm sure you're all aware, we are in the process of doing the 2020 census. So I'm on the Complete Count Committee, and we also hold a fund. We were lucky enough to receive 2 and then a 3rd grant to fund efforts around the census. So all of the materials that we have printed and paid for and distributed are in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and Portuguese. And Martha Turk was hired as their administrative assistant for this program and has worked so hard. My hat goes off to her. She has been extraordinary. Unfortunately, most of our efforts were around in-person question assistance centers that just can't happen right now. So we're going to a virtual, digital, social media kind of a platform, again, trying very hard to be at least bilingual in those areas, which is a little more challenging. I'm not a social media person, even in English, so I don't really know what that translates to if we're trying to get it in English and Portuguese, Spanish and Portuguese. But the efforts are continue, even though the dates have been pushed back a bit. Nantucket is at about 17% response rate, and the state is over 50%. So we are definitely lagging behind. It's not just our hard to reach communities. I think there's some issues with the mail. They refuse to mail our census forms to post office boxes. So that has been a challenge because a lot of, probably 50% of Nantucket receives their mail from their post office box. So exactly. So, if you're not aware of this and you don't know that you can go online this year or make a phone call, then it just isn't going to happen. And we could be hugely impacted for the next 10 years if we're going to be undercounted that significantly. So we're doing our best to get the word out as much as we can.
Yeah, and it's even more important now with some of the COVID relief coming out that if we see, relief efforts over the next year or two, they're going to be looking at our census.
Absolutely.
Just want to let Brian know, who asked that question. There are small groups forming that are taking these more complicated emergency orders from the state and from the town and trying to synthesize them and get them into understandable forms to the different areas of our non-English speaking community.
Right.
It's kind of another thing that we're collaborating, and these groups and structures are forming to get the word out outside of the town. Just so that is happening.
Right.
Any last words, any last thoughts for our small businesses? Words of inspiration before we get in this?
No, I think I've been seeing so much collaboration, and I think Margaretta with the Community Foundation, I'm on all of your emails as well, and I thank you for sending what the Chamber is doing, but I've also been following everything that you send, and you're such a valuable resource for nonprofits, so thank you for all that you're doing.
Oh, well, thank you. And back at you. I think the Chamber has really taken the lead here in a very positive way. It's been calming knowing that there's information coming out that makes sense to people, is not overwhelming, is timely. So yeah, for our nonprofits and the businesses, hang in there, guys. That's really the message. And to our donors, thank you, because in our world, we couldn't do anything without you. So we appreciate everything that you've done.
Thank you.
Thank you both for your leadership. You're doing amazing things for our community in a very, very tough time. And even your websites and just your organizations can answer a lot of questions. So people aren't sure, email the Chamber, email Kristie, go to their website. You guys have done a really great job of organizing a lot of information to kind of walk us through this.
That's great.
Thank you both. Thanks everybody for tuning in to the Nantucket Small Business Update. We hope to do this every Tuesday. It's live, and it will also be posted. Thank you to NCTVA team for putting in their resources to help us get this together and get it out to as many people as possible.
We need to be good to each other. For as they say, e pluribus